Welcome everyone to the third installment of our GreenPrints webinar series. I'm Puba Ganeshan, Principal Scientist at the Saskatchewan Food Industry Development Center. I'm your host for today's webinar. We are thrilled to have you back with us from within Canada and from across the world. Your commitment to building a greener, more sustainable future for the agri-food industry is truly commendable. Before we kick off today's webinar, I want to take a moment to reflect on the insightful discussion we had in the previous two webinars. The first one was about landscape of plant-based diets and how crucial it is in the environmental sustainability era. And also in the second one, we talked about shelflation and the race to find innovative solutions to reduce food waste here in Canada. Today, we are honored to welcome back Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, who will guide us to focus on AI and its role, artificial intelligence, and how it plays a role in reducing environmental impact and along the supply chain by improving efficiencies and reducing waste. Dr. Charlebois is a distinguished expert in food distribution and policy. He will draw upon his extensive research and consumer data and surveys to illuminate the untapped potential of AI in revolutionizing the agri-food sector. With over 750 peer-reviewed articles and a wealth of experience, he stands as a beacon of knowledge, guiding us towards a greener, more efficient future. Before we get started, I want to extend our gratitude to Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada for their continued support for the GreenPrints series. And lastly, please note that today's discussion will be recorded and made available on the GreenPrints webinar series pages in both English and French at the Food Center's website. Also, please utilize the Q&A box to submit your questions, and we'll answer them at the end of the webinar. Now, without further delay, let's delve into today's webinar on harnessing AI for waste reduction and efficiency enhancement in the Canadian agri-food supply chain. Join me in welcoming Dr. Sylvain Charlebois as we uncover the keys to a greener, more sustainable future for the Canadian agri-food industry. Sylvain, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Puba. It's nice to be back with GreenPrints for this third webinar. The whole idea of the series is to actually look at issues that can actually make our food systems more sustainable. And of course, we've looked at food waste. We've looked also at plant-based diets. That was a few months ago. But now we thought that perhaps we could talk about AI. AI is being headlined everywhere. I've seen so many webinars on AI in recent months. It is the topic of the year, as far as I'm concerned, especially when it comes to management, when it comes to forecasting. And I thought that it would be important to talk about it, to address the issue of AI, to look into how AI can actually make our food systems more sustainable. But there are also some blind spots related to AI. There's certainly some pitfalls. We've seen some issues erupt already with AI. About a year ago, we basically had these chatbots entering our world, like ChatGPT, for example. And when ChatGPT came into our world, we basically we saw the democratization of AI, in a sense, in our world. Because before ChatGPT, people thought about AI, heard about AI, but they weren't necessarily appreciative of how AI can change their world. Now, a year later, I think we have a better sense of what's possible, what can happen, what could happen, what should happen as well with AI. And it's a fascinating process so far, as I'm concerned, because basically we've been using AI for many years, actually. So on December 7th, we actually will be releasing Canada's food price report. That's in partnership with the University of British Columbia, University of Guelph, and the University of Saskatchewan as well. And behind the report is AI. Basically, we actually use machine learning, and it's been an interesting process over the last 14 years because we've always tried to improve our method. If you actually look at the last 13 reports, you'll see that the first chapter is all about how did we do compared to our forecasts. Was our forecast accurate? So Canada's Food Price Report is a forecast for the next year. So on December 7th, we'll basically be telling Canadians what to expect in terms of food inflation for the next 12 months. Now, forecasting is not an easy thing to do. I know a lot of people, I mean, the Bank of Canada will do that, consulting groups will do that, but rarely people will go back and assess how they did. We do that as a group to better our models as much as possible. And over the years, what we've learned using AI is simply this: there's some science to AI, but there's also some art to AI as well. So we just met with the four universities. All four universities will have different forecasts, and let me tell you, all forecasts are very different. And my job as a lead author is to actually build some consensus between the 26 or 27 co-authors, uh, uh, basically dispersed across four campuses. And that's not easy to do. And because numbers will basically be very different, every university will use different data sets. And frankly, it's really not necessarily that evident. And so the data, the models, the the AI generated data is really conversation starter. Uh, what's next comes humans talking about the data, and that's when it gets really interesting. And that's when you realize that AI has some limitations, because sometimes you'll actually see a model talk to you, and you won't believe it. You just won't. You'll say, that's impossible. How can broccoli increase by 15% next year? That's not possible. How can pork increase by 22% over the next while? And so, as humans, sometimes you'll actually see results that are counterintuitive. And that's really the challenge here. So well, it's one challenge, of course, and then we'll talk about privacy and how AI can actually be used against humanity and all that stuff. And there are a lot of concerns out there. But today, our talk is very much going to be about how food systems, how our food supply chain can be empowered by AI, and how it can actually improve things over time. So I want to give you a few ideas today in terms of how of the potential of using AI as a tool, whether it's with companies, if you're working with a company, in research, if you're an academic, or in policy, if you're part of policy groups, or even in government as well, how AI can actually help. And I actually think there's a great deal of work that can be done. I had the pleasure to be in Vancouver early this week at UBC, one of our partners, and it was the Wheat Symposium there. It was very well organized, I thought, and frankly, some of the research that are being done to come up with new breeds is just fascinating. And how do you know exactly how these breeds traits can actually impact the industry is something that perhaps AI can achieve. AI, to me, is about understanding the future before it happens. And it's not, it won't tell you the future. It will give you some scenarios about the probable future, not the future. And that's important to recognize. It's not going to tell you everything, but it's going to help you. Another project we were working on, and that we actually did complete very recently, is this whole issue of inflation. Inflation has really disrupted companies, governments, and most importantly, consumers themselves. And what we actually were able to do with the company called Skip in recent months is to develop a tool called the Inflation Cookbook. And the Inflation Cookbook is something you can actually go on your phone right now, and you can actually download the Inflation Cookbook. And the Inflation Cookbook will tell you right now what ingredients are actually cheaper in your neighborhood this week. What are the cheapest or cheaper, and what are most expensive, the food that you should be avoiding. But it doesn't stop there. The AI generated model will also give you through this app 7 recipes you can use that actually incorporates cheaper ingredients in your neighborhood. And that's why it's called the Inflation Cookbook. And so all of that stuff can actually help consumers deal with inflation or cope with inflation. So AI can actually be quite powerful. It can be retailable, but it can also actually help different segments, different nodes of the supply chain. And let's start with farm gates. Now, when you look at both ends of the food continuum, I would say right now, farmers are a bit ahead of the game when it comes to the use of AI, the use of precision agriculture. I mean, frankly, a lot of farmers actually do use a lot of technologies. Uh, I would say much more so than in processing, to be honest. On the other end, you have consumers who are very tech savvy. They use a lot of technology, but in between retail and distribution and processing, there's not as much AI adoption. So, generally speaking, the food industry has been slow in adopting AI technologies compared to other sectors, except for farmers and consumers. And so, but with farmers, of course, AI is about making decisions, making better decisions. And as you know, this industry, farming is all about intuition. Still, I mean, intuition is intuit intuitive decision making is very powerful in farming. And so that's why a lot of farmers tend to say, well, I want some samplings. I want to know exactly what's going on with my fields. I want to increase yields in this way or that way. I want to get some data. So there's some appetite for more data for sure, but to actually allow AI to tell a farmer what could happen, what should happen. Um, I'm not sure it's there, but I think really at the end of the day, farming is about humans growing food. And so, but I do believe that there is a very healthy balance between farming and the use of technology right now, especially I would say out west in the prairies, where you do see businesses, farmers operate in that fashion for sure. So obviously, the one uncertainty we all deal with is the weather, starting with farmers, and of course, with weather, there's lots of AI being used. I mean, you basically use AI every single day. In fact, the average human will use AI probably 7, 8 times a day without even knowing. So we're talking about deliberately using AI in order to run your business, in order to set better policy, and the weather is going to be very important. It's going to be an important factor when it comes to the use of AI. The more you're able to predict the weather, the better off you are. And every year, farmers tend to not be sure. I mean, that's why the industry tends to be risk averse most of the time. So, how do you actually do that? How do you deal with the weather? And I do think that AI can actually play a much more important role. Now, the one thing that I've learned through the years with AI is that AI, a model, machine learning, whatever you're talking about, is as useful as the value of the data you put in models. And so we often talk about climate change. Well, climate change has been changing for centuries, really. And so, but how you actually know for sure that your lot or your area will it will allow you to actually understand exactly what goes on with the weather. That's so you kind of have to kind of adopt a micro approach to AI, but you need data. You need good data, and that's been the most challenging thing at the lab here. Um, we've been relying on Statistics Canada, but we've come to realize that the data coming out of Statistics Canada is not highly reliable. I mean, it gives us a picture of the past often, and it's not necessarily exact. So we've been spending a lot of time and money to get to better data for ourselves. And so where I think we're getting into a better place. In fact, to predict Canadian prices, we are actually using American data and European data. So there is a data deficit in Canada. And so we can do all we want with AI, but if we don't have good data, it's not useful for us. And that's something that I've actually mentioned in Ottawa several times. And frankly, I think it's needed. We need more data, better data. And the weather, again, we have some good data, but it could be improved in the United States. I mean, if you go to the United States, I actually was a visiting professor last year in the United States for 6 months, and they have a lot of data, lots of good data. Uh, Sustainable agriculture and sustainability optimization, of course. Uh, we have to talk about waste. We have to talk about efficiencies. Uh, the last thing farmers want to do is to waste anything, waste inputs, waste time. So to optimize everything, if you don't optimize, you will waste. And so, and waste is just not a good approach from an environmental perspective. You want to be as effective as possible. And so that's why I think it's important for farmers to realize that that really there's lots of potential. And the other thing that I should mention about AI, looking at economic cycles, is that right now I would say that we're seeing more AI providers, AI solution providers, monetizing their business. And so last year with ChatGPT, when it was introduced, um, a lot of companies were startups, and people were just looking at AI. They were dabbling with the concept, but now we're starting to see companies making money dealing with farmers, dealing with agri-food companies. And I think it's very interesting. And that's why I think we're just at the very beginning of a very important process. And I think the era we're just starting right now will be as revolutionary as when the internet entered our lives way back when in the 90s. And so it is going to be profound. Absolutely. The way we work, the way we strategize, the way we do everything is going to change. Will it replace humans? It will replace some tasks for sure, but I actually don't believe it's going to replace humans. You're going to need farmers, you're going to need processors. It's just people will need different skill sets. So that's why it's important for people to embrace AI, understand its power, and see where things can go. Supply chain management. So beyond farming, of course, you have to think about traceability. This is my passion. I've actually started my career 20 somewhat years ago looking at traceability. When in those days, traceability was traceability was not a word recognized by Word Microsoft. So, but now people know what traceability is. Of course, we have requirements in Canada about traceability, one up, one down. But here's the thing about what's happening right now with chatbots and everything else. When people can actually understand the potential of AI, what AI can do, expectations change. Consumers actually are starting to realize exactly how um, how AI can actually change their lives, but how industry can use AI as well. So, for example, why wouldn't I know where my food is coming from? Why wouldn't I actually expect an eco label, for example, like we're seeing in Europe? Why wouldn't I be able to see the carbon footprint on labels when I buy a food product in Canada? I mean, some of these questions are coming up more and more often. I don't know about you, but we actually get these questions. Why is it not possible? Because of AI, why wouldn't we be doing that? Stock management and waste reduction and dynamic pricing. So if you don't know what dynamic pricing is, it's starting to happen in many different places. Dynamic pricing is about setting retail prices based on supply and demand. So, for example, let's say it's beautiful outside, it's 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and you have this huge, lovely pile of tomatoes being sold to consumers at 9 o'clock in the morning. And so people come in, they grab tomatoes, they buy tomatoes. But let's say by 11 o'clock, people aren't buying tomatoes because it's getting dark all of a sudden, and people don't necessarily want to eat salad, for example, so they're going for another produce or something else. Well, you could actually bring down the price at 11 o'clock for a couple of hours to increase demand, so people will buy tomatoes and then get some savings done. So dynamic pricing is about um, managing that delicate balance between supply and demand in real time. So we're seeing that a lot more in Europe, in Asia for sure. In Canada, we're starting to see it more and more. There are some chains where you have digital prices at retail, and you can basically change prices throughout the day many times. The archaic way of doing it is that you basically will change prices once a day, maybe twice a day. You'll have flyers, you send out flyers, people know what's on sale or not. I actually think because of AI, things may actually become way more dynamic, and people will look at prices and will strategize in terms of when they actually show up at the grocery store, what day they show up at the grocery store, and they'll know what to buy. So there'll be a bit of a dance between uh, retailers in the food industry and the consumer. So the consumer, as it is trying to figure out where to get the best deals possible, the best products, on the supply side, the whole idea is to reduce waste as much as possible. And we're seeing with inflation right now, the entire food supply chain is wasting less food because of the cost of food. I'm on the board of Second Harvest in Toronto, and we're in the food bank system, if you will, and food banks are having a harder time getting food to help people because the cost of food is actually much higher now. So this dynamic pricing is all about AI predicting, planning, and so on and so forth. So I think it's pretty exciting. Of course, a lot of people are, oh my God, well, how are we going to plan for this? How are we going to do this? But I do think at the end of the day, it's about optimizing this balance between supply and demand, but it's also about optimizing profits and reducing waste as well, as much as possible. And you can see that you can see more vertical coordination. There's a lot of talk about the code of conduct right now. And the code of conduct between grocers and suppliers is going to be key to actually reduce waste and stabilize prices. The reason why we're seeing some shocks right now with some products is that there's not a whole lot of vertical coordination going on right now. In Australia, Ireland, and the UK, they all have a code of conduct, a grocer code of conduct. And what we've noticed in our research is that prices are much more stable over the last 10 years. They're still increasing, of course, but they're much more stable because with more vertical coordination, you can actually stabilize or cope with shocks Ukraine, for example, or the weather, climate change affecting the production of this or that. And so you can actually we can actually absorb shocks. And when there's more vertical coordination, there's more stability, and there's less price fluctuation, essentially, or less price volatility. And so, but with vertical coordination, you need, or good vertical coordination, you need AI as well. And companies are starting to figure that one out. It's just a matter of culture. We all know that some companies aren't necessarily buying into the code of conduct, but generally speaking, I think most companies actually do see the relevancy of better vertical coordination through supply chain management. Product quality, of course, very important. People are noticing that the quality of some of the products are a bit affected. Well, why not actually look at AI and see exactly what can be done? And of course, the human eye, humans can do so much. We're already seeing product quality being impacted by AI. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's about predicting. So you can actually, let's say, for example, there's some weather patterns, and you can actually see correlations between weather patterns and the quality of eggs, for example. That could actually impact, how you manage your company based on what's ahead. Let's say, for example, you're seeing demand for this being impacted by some factor, the currency, trades, some droughts in America or elsewhere. Well, you can actually temper how these problems can actually impact your quality. Um, the largest recall in Canadian history was XL Foods in Alberta in 2012. My guess is that with AI, you could have actually predicted the recall. You could have actually prevented the recall even. I visited the plant in Brooks many years ago, and it was really fascinating to see the culture and see exactly what was going on there. But I actually do believe that there's a way to predict recalls as much as possible. And there's lots of things we can discuss there for sure. What metric you should be looking at in order to assess the risks of recall and problems, quality problems over time. Automated sorting and classification, of course, with many commodities, you do have some qualifications and classifications. Why not actually use AI for that and save time? And sometimes it can take a lot of time. It can actually slow down the process. But if you actually have all things done, actually, in fact, I was talking to people from the Canadian Grain Commission in Vancouver. They were actually in that symposium I was at, and they actually are looking at AI. How can you actually predict the quality of some grains based on a variety of different factors, depending on where the grain was from, who farmed it, how it was farmed, etc. So pretty fascinating there. Food and nutrition personalization. We do talk more about customization, how you customize the experience, how you actually provide the exact right product for the right people. I call it the Fitbitization of food, essentially. Everyone's different. Everyone has different needs. It becomes very difficult for people to really understand how you can actually um, benefit from better nutrition. And of course, as we age, our nutrition should change also. How do we actually make these changes in order to really get the best nutrition possible? And I think because of our aging population, I think it's important for people to realize that and of course, with inflation, with higher prices, you want to get the best bang for your buck. Personalized food recommendations and menu optimization. Can you imagine if you walk into a coffee shop and you get a coffee back to you, serve at the right temperature with the right level, because you don't want to spill coffee in your car when you actually drive away. with the right amount of milk, all that stuff that could be done without questions when you actually order. Just a simple just a simple task that can actually go a long way. The development of new products. I mean, over time, developing new products in the food industry is costly. It's lengthy. Right now, of course, where most companies are looking at the front of packaging, front of label packaging rules that are coming up by 2026, reformulating products, looking at sugar, sodium, and fat. How do you actually develop new products much more in a much faster fashion, reducing costs and reducing waste as well? Optimization of the experiential. Well, it's not food is not just about the calories. It's not just about the food itself. It's also about the experience around. Some people, will prefer uh, at a restaurant candle lights. Some people don't. Some people like fire service. Some people don't like fire service. Everything can actually be designed and organized in a way that really you can optimize everything as much as possible. I spoke about food safety, contaminant detection. Essentially, it's really about, again, understanding risk where they are. Like, how do you actually assess risks overall? Monitoring product recalls. For example, wouldn't it be nice if you actually look at a company's balance sheet to predict recalls? It has nothing to do with practices, has nothing to do uh, with employee skills, what they do. You can actually look at other metrics and see what other correlations you can actually build around companies, around inspections. Of course, the CFIA, many regulations, food safety regulators around the world are adopting a risk-based assessment process to save resources, to become more efficient. Why not actually use AI for that? And I'm not sure the CFI is there. I think it's actually looking into it, but I'm not sure it's there yet. Food fraud, that's a big one. Food fraud is, in my view, one of the largest challenges that the food industry is facing. How do we deal with that? How do we predict? And there's so much going on in food retail. Consumers are more aware. 5 years ago, 5 or 7 years ago, I had to explain to people what food fraud was. Not anymore. People actually know that food fraud exists and it's a problem. So how do we deal with that is an issue. And again, for companies, with suppliers, how do you actually know for a fact that you actually are dealing with a good supplier? And what are your options? And when should you expect to get a questionable batch of products or ingredients, and when it is time to test and not waste? So those are things that companies can do with AI as well. But there are some blind spots with AI, and I'm sure you've heard most of them because a lot of people are looking at AI very positively. But we actually did survey Canadians a few months ago about AI, how they felt about AI, and it's not clear. And so we asked these questions to Canadians: how do you feel about the use of AI in the grocery industry or restaurant sector? 26.5% said that I'm worried about the potential negative impact on jobs. So people actually are seeing this as a menace to jobs. I'm not sure I agree with that because actually they were saying that with computers back in the 80s and 90s, and we're still employing a lot of people. And so it's just the markets actually figured it out. I'm worried about the potential negative impact on privacy. That's a big one, 21.8%. I think it is a great idea, 16.3%. So it's not much. A lot of people are still wondering, okay, what is this thing? And there's lots of media about AI, and I would say that a lot of it is actually not all that positive. So companies know this, and companies in food industry, well, it's all about traditions and culture. Do you want to compromise all of that by saying, well, we're using AI? It doesn't really kind of fit well naturally with food, really, when it comes to technology. And there's always been this interesting nexus between food and technology, because you don't want to denaturalize food, really, or you don't want to be perceived as a company who's denaturalizing food overall. And I'm not sure how I feel about it. 35.4%. So a lot of people are actually still on the sidelines with AI, generally speaking. Do you think the growing use of AI in the food industry could increase risks of seeing our food supplies being used as a weapon? So weaponizing AI, 27. So there's a lot of coverage about that in the media. 27% said yes, 24.8% said no, and 48% said I don't know. So there's lots of unknown still out there from consumers. So while companies and policymakers see the potential of using AI, of using technology, they also know that the public may not be ready to see more AI, even though most people are using AI on a regular basis every single day, which is interesting. We also kind of looked at the data from by province as well, and results are really interesting. So the trust use of AI in the food industry is not very high. In fact, it's actually in Saskatchewan, it's the lowest, and I don't know why in Saskatchewan, but it varies, and the highest is actually in Quebec. Um, so the trust factor, the don't trust. Well, so Saskatchewan is number one for sure, and number 10 is actually Prince Edward Island. So you can see that there are some major variations between provinces when it comes to trust and not trusting AI as well. And so we do have a lot more information, a lot more data about how people trust or not trust AI. It's actually on our website. You can just Google the Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University, and you'll see all of our reports. And all of our reports are available for free in both English and French. And we do talk a lot about AI on our podcast, the Food Professor podcast. So we have a weekly episode. So our latest episode was released this morning, actually. I don't think this week we talk about AI. We talk about Metro, Loblaws. We talk about the beer store in Ontario. We talk a lot, a bunch of things. The code of conduct, food insecurity. We don't necessarily talk about AI, but we do talk about AI a lot. So if you want to join us, we're one of the top Canadian podcasts, according to Apple. And yeah, I'd love to join you. And you can actually just go and use your favorite platform, Apple, Spotify, Simplecast, and Google Podcasts. You can actually have access to our podcasts through all of these platforms. And I guess on that note, I will leave it at that, and I will stop sharing my screen, and I'll throw it back to Puba. And I'm not sure if we have any questions. I think we do have some questions, but I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvain, for this enlightening talk. And we'll switch over to, there's a question here that I can give to you. As per FAO, 40% of post-farm produce does not reach kitchen tables. 80% potable water is used for agriculture purposes. Organic food waste streams from farms to kitchen tables are responsible for 57% methane gas. Landfill diversion is necessary. Why throw away resources? Why not use AI to monetize the challenges and benefits? AI can help for me to by sharing ROI and SROI. Yeah, it's more like a comment, thought, and I think you touched upon many of those aspects.
Yeah, Absolutely. I mean, the one reason why we waste a lot is that companies are not able to predict. They're not able to forecast. If you actually know, or if you have a better sense of what lies ahead, you can actually plan ahead. You can store. You can move with inventory. You can pace yourself as much as possible. The supply chain is actually quite dynamic, and in fact, actually, I was just going to talk about, I forgot to mention that Metro just built a new facility in Montreal, in Terrebonne, a state of the art distribution center. And if you notice in the media, there's lots of companies building distribution centers. The reason why they're building distribution centers is because they're focusing more on AI. And so you have the last mile. The last mile is about connecting businesses with consumers. But what we're seeing more and more in Canada, and thank goodness for that, we actually are seeing more companies investing in the middle mile. So uh, between production and distribution before to service either restaurants or stores, that middle mile can actually allow companies to better plan. And a lot of it has to do with AI. I'm actually going to be touring the distribution center in Metro on December 8th. I'm looking forward to it. But I've actually toured quite a few distribution centers. Loblaws is building one in Newmarket in Ontario, just north of Toronto, 1.2 million square feet. That's huge. And it's going to be highly automated, and the automation is all going to be about AI. So the distribution center can predict what store will need what product even before the store knows it, or even before the manager knows it. And so, of course, you still need humans to validate, but it will help management better manage inventories. And if you go back up the food chain, same thing. AI can actually help you with I would say a nice crystal ball.
Okay, thank you, Sylvain. And I'll just follow up on this question about food waste and AI. And do you see a time when AI would be actually be used for food banks, for example? We know there's a challenge and food banks are stretched to the limit. And you're talking about, especially at the retail, we know there's a lot of food waste. And like you said, it's a predictive kind of system where now you can actually divert the food before actually the waste or it expires to the food
Yep.
bank. Is that something that you can see happening with the AI technology?
Oh, absolutely, of course, yeah, and frankly, well, at Second Harvest, there are some discussions about that. Why wouldn't you do that? I mean, I suspect that a lot of food banks are looking into this. I mean, for many years, let's be honest, the food rescuing sector was not, I guess, recognized. But now today, I think most Canadians actually appreciate that we need a food rescuing sector to support people in need, especially when it comes to emergencies. People will continue to lose their jobs, and sometimes people need support. And food rescuers can actually do a much better job responding to acute needs, much more effectively than government programs. We saw that during COVID, and that's not going to change. What I what I'm really surprised to see is that we tend to focus on certain things that are not food related with AI that I think we should be using. For example, if you remember, Puba, a few years ago with COVID, we actually were all given the opportunity to download an app to tell us whether or not we were exposed to someone with COVID. Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Well,
Yeah,
well, why wouldn't we actually develop an app that would tell you if you actually bought a product that could be recalled, or may be recalled, or is being recalled? So I know that the CFIA, there is this high reliance on media to convey information. And we all know what's going on with media. I mean, media is struggling. We can't rely on media anymore to inform the public proactively. And so I actually do think that there's potential there to communicate risks to the public so they can protect themselves with the proper information.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And any recall, it's always related to the product number, the label, and all the no consumers really pay attention to that. And then now they have to see, is my product in the fridge the one on the recall list? And you don't
Yeah,
really know.
if you remember Puba a couple of years ago, there were onions from California being recalled in the middle of August. Well, who watches the news in August? Like
Exactly.
seriously. And people eat onions raw in August. So I mean, you got to inform the public in some way. And so that's why I think it's important to think about some of these things. And I think that, some better communication strategies are warranted.
Yeah, definitely. There's another question here. Is there a separate report for aquaculture versus a blanket agriculture?
I'm not sure what the nature of the question is. I'm not aware.
Separate report. Maybe this person is referring to that food report you mentioned in the beginning. The
Oh, the food
pricing
price
on,
report.
yeah, price report.
Well, we're actually forecasting based on 9 food categories. One is fish and seafood, but we don't necessarily look at agriculture specifically. No,
Okay.
but it's a good recommendation. We can talk to our partners for next year.
Good. Thank you. Do you think AI can help with food insecurity? I feel it is possible, but I worry that this technological change will provide more benefit to high income and middle income consumers and leave out the low income consumers. I work at a food bank, by the way, so I think it's almost ties up with what we talked just now.
So, very good question. This summer, Ottawa sent out $2.5 billion in grocery rebates to 11 million people without knowing how much money was spent on food. Okay.
Mhm.
That's our model today. Okay. I know there's some politics there. I get it. I understand. So when you politicize food inflation, that's so those are some of the things we do. But food banks are affected like in real terms, like they are seeing more traffic. Why wouldn't you want to develop a like in BC, for example, they launched this beautiful nutrition coupons. You can only redeem at farmers markets. So 10,000 families get support every month. It's $1 million a year. It's not 2.5 billion. It's just $1 million a year. They get little support. They can actually go to a farmer's market to get real food, good food they can cook with for free. And they get the support of that program. If you are to set up a program like that, then you'll need AI to predict exactly how much demand you'll get for these coupons, and of course everything is discrete. You're not going to basically. It's not like food stamps in the U.S. It's a very different program, but if you set up a program like that, you can actually predict demand in certain areas for certain farmers markets and readjust your supplies based on where needs are. Right now, food banks are a miracle to the human spirit. They do whatever they can to support as many people as possible. And it's been very difficult for them to plan ahead of time. I would say the same thing for food banks, is it would be important using AI to predict demand. Ukrainians, I was actually visiting the Calgary food bank a few months ago. There were many Ukrainians that came to Canada, and the economic onboarding of Ukrainians is not that easy. In the meantime, you need food banks to support many of them. They couldn't plan this. They couldn't plan this ahead of time, but with AI, you can actually plan exactly what it will be the demand for when there's a war somewhere around the world. Right now, we all know what's going on in the Middle East. It's horrible. So, what are the future implications of what may happen in the Middle East over the next 2-3 years? Food banks will need to know. Look at what happened with Syria a few years ago, just a few years ago. And so, I think we can become more strategic about some of these things by using different models.
Thank you. And can you talk about initiatives and businesses that are out there using AI specifically in food waste after they reach landfill?
I can't like specific companies. I don't want to like to throw names like that. I can tell you that there are companies using AI for sure. Oh yeah, special and but I can't really name any companies, but a lot of companies are looking into it because they recognize the power, and so the level of adoption will only increase. Like I said, a lot of companies are starting to make money. Like AI providers are starting to make money. That's a sign. So if you're a company out there and you haven't really talked about AI, and uh, there's the technology and there's the culture. And let me tell you, as a user of AI, culture is the larger of the challenges that you have to face, because a lot of people will say, you know what, I'm a better decision maker. I'm not going to let some model tell me exactly what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen. That's the problem with AI from an organizational perspective.
Yeah, no, I agree. And which brings me to one of my questions. There are no questions at this moment, but one of mine then was regarding your survey that you had. And among the provinces, were you surprised by that trust, no trust?
I was a little, yeah, I was a little. I think. I mean, Pupa, I actually think I don't know what your thought, if you were surprised or not, but I actually think that a lot of people just don't know what to think of AI. They're starting to see what is possible, but they don't necessarily know what to think. And so I think the next couple of years will be very critical. And I think the message coming from the survey, the message to the food industry is that be careful. You know, make sure people understand what you're doing as much as possible. So it's all about transparency. And but at the end of the day, AI is going to be this silent tool. Like, do people really want to know? The problem is that we've had some cybersecurity issues in Canada, major ones. Sobeys, Maple Leaf, most liquor boards were attacked. Even a hog farmer in Ontario was actually attacked, uh, and not for money. It was actually the person was looking for an apology because the hog farmer, well, farmed hogs, and that person came from a vegan group and felt that hog farming shouldn't exist. So there's lots of that going on. Will AI make your company more vulnerable or less vulnerable? I think that's really one of the most important things, because if something goes wrong, you don't. That's why I don't think humans will ever disappear. I actually think humans will be even more valuable in a AI dominated world.
Mhm. Thank you. Yeah, that's why that margin of don't know, not sure is very high. That means there's still a lack of awareness, education, and yeah, that's the reason why it's high, and also the negative perception about it. And same, the other question was about job losses. And again, same thing. It was a majority of them were not sure. But for me, what struck me more about that was nobody even mentioned about sustainability or
No, no.
efficiency, and in that, so the understanding is not there yet in terms of its positive impact, but they are looking more at it's more the human kind of point of view, like the personal, how it in fact impacts me as a human being is the major focus of it, I think.
Yeah, I think yeah, you're absolutely right, Bubba, in your analysis. I think a lot of people are individualizing the issue. I certainly see it the same way as you do. I think AI is an opportunity to actually make our supply chain, our food supply chain, more efficient and therefore more sustainable.
Thank you. And we've got a few more minutes. And you have talked about one of the things I saw is about the experiential optimization with AI, which is great. But then this experiential that you're talking about is very subjective. You mentioned that also. It's like the atmosphere, the ambience that is there. So how do you see AI becoming a little bit more personalized? Are we going to be there someday where you push a button, you have a personalized experience with your food, for example, the way you want it? And I know because experience is very cultural. You go to France, it's completely different. You go to US, it's different. Even within
Yep.
Canada, from province to province, it is different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if you actually enjoy the element of surprise, well, AI may not be for you, or maybe it is because the company serving you or the restaurant serving you will know exactly how to serve you. And like for example, when I go to a restaurant, I never look at the menu. I always ask the waiter or the waitress to order for me because they know what they're good at. I don't. When I go into a restaurant for the first time, how do I know if they actually are good at serving chicken or fish or I have no idea. So I let them. So, but every time, Poopa, I do that, waitresses or waiters are going, "What? What do I order for you?" Instead of just arguing and they just, please just bring me whatever and I'll enjoy it. I'm sure I'll enjoy it. And every time it's always a great experience. But it's this awkwardness of telling people, well, no, I don't like to order off the menu. I eat anything. I'm not allergic to anything. So there you go. And someone else is paying for my meal.
No, but that's a good way to do it also. I mean, it's approaching AI with a human
Yeah.
touch in here, what you're saying about. And
Well, so some restaurants, and speaking of sustainability, some restaurants in Europe, they only have one item on the menu every day. And so if, let's say, for example, your meal is kale salad, artichoke, something like that. Well, with AI, you can over time you can tell how many people you'll actually have in that day, you know?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, it
that's
reduces
another way to actually use
yeah,
AI. Yeah.
yeah, no, that's right. And one last question from me, because it's almost time. I know it's in the news, there's a lot of talk about it. Regulatory policy framework, where are we at in Canada? And are we there yet on a firm policy regulatory framework? Because I know there's a lot of debate on it. What's your thoughts on those?
There's not much. I mean, there is some talks about it, but it's at a very early stage. I can tell you that Ag Canada, there's not a whole lot of discussions there that I'm aware of. Maybe I missed it, but I'm not aware of many things. I do see, like FCC, for example, last week did have an event. I believe it was in Saskatoon last week, and of course, AI was part of the agenda. There's some of that going on, but from a policy perspective, I think we're at a very early stage right now.
Okay. Good. Thank you, Silva. And I think we have just about come to the end of our session. There are no more questions. Thank you again, Silva, for this interesting presentation. And to a reminder to our audience, our next webinar will be January 2024. So keep an eye for our announcement. And thank you again for everyone for attending this webinar today. And thank you, Silva. We'll see you in the new year.
All right, take care. Bye bye.
Bye.